The views and opinions of this broadcast do not reflect the views and opinions of Armed Media, New Productions and its affiliates. Enjoy the show.
I'm your darkest dream. They call me devil. My heart is empty. They call me devil, and you should be afraid.
It's Friday again on Armed Radio, and I'm your host, Kasy, for this week's episode of Betrayal. Now, every week I'm going to be presenting to you guys a new and interesting story of betrayal. So hopefully you guys will like this story, and, it's going to be an interesting one. So please enjoy this episode of Betrayal.
Virgin Hollywood circa 1900. A land of orange groves and peaceful stretches of scenic farms. In 1902, the Biograph Film Company, seeking a more temperate climate for filmmaking, left its home in Cliffside, New Jersey, and the face of Hollywood changed forever. Soon after Biograph's arrival, other entertainment industry entrepreneurs followed suit, and dozens of primitive film studios sprang up in the community. While the melodramas ground out by these pioneers lacked production value and concrete plots, the films proved an enormous success with the public. And as demand for the product grew, so grew Hollywood. Within the next few decades, the eyes of the world focused on the flourishing community. Newspaper, magazine, and radio reporters reveled in recounting tales of both the glamorous and darker side of life in the show business capital. In this program, we will re-examine some of the more sensational events which occurred in Hollywood during the so-called golden years, the 1920s, through the 1940s, and into the 1970s. The town was beset daily by countless tales of scandal. There was sex, there was sin, and sometimes there was murder. Sharon Tate, brutally murdered and her body mutilated by followers of the self-styled Antichrist Charles Manson. Ramon Navarro, a one-time sex symbol and the co-star of the biblical epic Ben-Hur, beaten to death by male prostitutes. Sal Mineo, yet another cast member of Rebel Without a Cause, who, like his co-stars, died under violent or unusual circumstances. The 37-year-old homosexual actor was stabbed to death. Director William Desmond Taylor. His murder led to wild speculation as to who were the perpetrators. Ted Healy, creator of the popular Three Stooges, was beaten to death at the height of his career. Media attention was also directed towards those celebrities who died by their own hand. Many took their lives for apparently no reason. Albert Decker, star of the science fiction hit Dr. Cyclops, hung himself dressed in kinky bondage gear, using lipstick to paint his body with obscenities. Freddie Prinze, rising young comic who was obsessed with death, as was his idol, obscene comic Lenny Bruce. Prinze frequently threatened to take his own life, and finally did, via handgun. George Reeves had legions of fans due to his portrayal of Superman. As a depressed Reeves left the living room of his hillside home, a guest joked that Reeves would probably go upstairs and shoot himself. Moments later, the prediction came true. Sex scandals in Hollywood are as old as the town itself. The biggest names in the industry were not immune to the damage caused to their personal and professional lives by public exposure. Secret sexual preferences of some of the town's leading male stars surprised and shocked fans for decades, which saw a great number of performers come out of the closet, including Charles Lawton, Rock Hudson, and Montgomery Clift. These and other shocking and bizarre stories will unfold in Hollywood, Scandals and Tragedies. (1921). No sooner did Hollywood establish a so-called star system when one of the brightest stars fell from grace with the public. Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle, the rotund comic, co-starred with such talents as Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton. By mid-1918, he had become one of the nation's most beloved comics. In his films, he usually portrayed an innocent, wide-eyed child man. In 1921, Arbuckle drove his brand-new $20,000 McFarland car to San Francisco, where he found himself embroiled in a Labor Day weekend soiree, which left the comic labeled a monster and sexual pervert. Subsequently, his career was destroyed. Despite the fact that it was the height of Prohibition, bootleg booze flowed freely at a party hosted by Fatty Arbuckle. An aspiring young actress named Virginia Rapay, but pronounced Rape by the media, joined an Arbuckle party in room 1220 of San Francisco's St. Francis Hotel. While at Arbuckle's party, Rapay became intoxicated, then violently ill. The actress had to be removed to a private hospital where she died hours later. One explanation of the cause of her death was that Miss Rapay suffered a lesion of the bladder complicated by previous internal problems, several abortions, and alcoholism. While in the hospital, in a hysterical condition, Rapay claimed that Arbuckle had attacked her. Examining the facts available, the local district attorney relied on testimony of certain witnesses to indict Arbuckle on a murder charge, as a life taken in rape was considered to be murder under the existing state laws. Before the trial of Arbuckle even began, the tabloids took aim and fired. Items deriding Arbuckle ranged from describing the poor condition of his mother's grave to his attire the day of his wild party. He was dressed in lounging pajamas. Most of the tabloid accounts of the Arbuckle affair were designed to sell newspapers. Articles alluded to a hideously unnatural rape and to the actor's rage at his drunken impotence. Tabloids devoted front-page coverage to photos of Rapay's torn and bloodied blouse. The most unsettling rumor, one which still prevails today, was that the internal injuries to Virginia Rapay occurred when Arbuckle had ravaged the starlet with a Coca-Cola bottle. An alternate version of the incident had Arbuckle employing a champagne bottle, then assaulting the girl again with a jagged piece of ice. One of the scandal sheets of the day went so far as to circulate a photo of Arbuckle and Rapay's likenesses superimposed over a champagne bottle. Following 3 lengthy trials, Arbuckle was acquitted. He remained, however, guilty in the eyes of his former fans. In 1933, Arbuckle died of heart failure, ending years of attempts to make a comeback. His funeral was sparsely attended and generally ignored by the Hollywood community. However, movie mogul Joseph Schenck eulogized Arbuckle, saying, "His was the tragedy of a man born to make the world laugh and to receive only suffering as his reward." Rapay's fiancé, film director Henry Lehrman, remembered Arbuckle and the St. Francis Hotel incident in a different light. Lehrman recalled, "This is what comes of taking vulgarians from the gutter and giving them enormous salaries. Some people don't know how to get a kick out of life except in a beastly way. They are the ones who participate in orgies that surpass those of degenerate Rome." While many argued that the death of Virginia Rapay was murder, and the issue probably will never be resolved, there stands a long list of genuine murders which taint Hollywood's past. The fact that his murder occurred on Halloween Day in 1968 befitted the strange circumstances which led to the death of one-time matinee idol Ramon Novarro. Often compared to sex idol Rudolph Valentino, Navarro's career skyrocketed after he was cast as the leading man in the biblical epic Ben-Hur. The Mexican-born star attracted throngs of adoring female fans to theaters to see him star in such epics as The Prisoner of Zenda, Scaramouche, The Student Prince, and The Midshipman. After starring in Ben-Hur, fan mail simply addressed to Mr. Ben-Hur Hollywood easily found its way to Navarro. Navarro's roster of on-screen love interests included Norma Shearer, Myrna Loy, Helen Hayes, and Greta Garbo. After a lengthy film career, Navarro abandoned his acting pursuits and Latin lover image and turned his off-screen attention to male prostitutes. Two such prostitutes, brothers at that, were sought out by Navarro and invited to his North Hollywood home. Intrigued by the possibility of selling some of the memorabilia in the actor's home, the pair overpowered Navarro and beat him to death. The brothers attempted to leave evidence of a robbery. They bound Navarro's wrists and ankles with an electrical cord, dug deep gashes into his neck to feign a woman's fingernail scratches, and scattered condoms over Navarro's body. In a final gruesome gesture, the shaft of the cane used to beat Navarro was broken and placed between Navarro's legs. The brothers were arrested within hours. The pair was convicted of murder and imprisoned for life. However, only 7 years after beginning their life sentences, both of the murderers were paroled. Almost a year later, but only minutes away from the site of the Ramon Navarro home, another brutal, shocking home invasion occurred, one which claimed 5 victims. Sharon Tate, wife of the talented film director Roman Polanski, was 8.5 months pregnant the evening 4 members of Charles Manson's so-called family made their way into the Polanski-Tate home. The carnage which occurred that night shocked and startled the Hollywood community far more than any celebrity murder ever had. The Polanski-Tate home was gated and guarded, yet the home invaders had little trouble gaining access to the grounds of the Cielo Drive home. Victims of the Manson family were Stephen Parent, teenaged friend of the groundskeeper, was slashed, then shot 4 times. Abigail Folger, coffee fortune heiress. She was pierced by a knife blade 28 times by 2 of Manson's followers, who took turns stabbing the young woman so as not to exhaust themselves. Wojciech Frykowski, internationally renowned film producer, was beaten with the butt of a pistol and stabbed repeatedly. His autopsy revealed the victim had been stabbed 51 times. Jay Sebring, hairstylist to the stars. He was first shot, then stabbed repeatedly. Sharon Tate was the final victim. While she pleaded for the life of her unborn child, Manson disciple Tex Watson repeatedly drove his knife into her body. One member of the Manson clan suggested removing the unborn fetus from the mother's womb as a satanic sort of souvenir. The Manson family members had truly lived up to their leader's instructions to make the killings as shocking and savage as possible, to mutilate and butcher. From then on, until the Manson family was captured, Hollywood's beautiful people slept behind locked doors. Sal Mineo was noted for an array of roles as a troubled teenager.
See, I don't want for no one to know.
I understand.
I need an operation.
An operation?
Oh, I don't want Mama to worry. She doesn't know. But I made her take me here. Oh, I thought...
What's wrong with you?
Mineo was 37 years old when the Rebel Without a Cause curse caught up with him. Ironically, all of the major talents associated with 1955's Rebel Without a Cause met tragic deaths. The film's star, James Dean, was killed in a violent car crash the year of the movie's release. In Dean's final film appearance, he alluded in tongue-in-cheek fashion to death on the highway.
Oh, wait a minute, Jimmy. One more question. Do you have any special advice for the young people who drive?
Take it easy driving. Life, you might say, might be mine.
Dean's co-star Natalie Wood drowned in a freak accident in 1984. Supporting actor and rebel Nick Adams also died at age 37 by drug overdose in 1968. Most historians speculate that his death was suicide. However, nothing was found at the death scene suggesting the presence of drugs. The events surrounding Minio's death, like Nick Adams, led to widespread speculation as to motive.
That's okay with me, Doc.
By 1976, Minio had come out of the closet and was recognized as yet another of the Hollywood community's overt bisexuals. Minio was living in the West Hollywood area of Los Angeles, which is noted for its large homosexual population.
I'm looking for a fella.
As he was returning from a play rehearsal, he was attacked and stabbed through his heart. Since his wallet and jewelry had not been disturbed, it was rumored that he had been killed during a dispute with a male lover. Several years later, an inmate of a Michigan jail, Lionel Ray Williams, boasted of killing Minio. Authorities tape-recorded a number of conversations Williams had with fellow prisoners, and it was discovered that Williams knew certain details of the crime which were never made public. He was brought to trial and convicted of Minio's murder. Even the beloved Three Stooges were not immune to tragedy entering their lives. The Stooges' creator and mentor, Ted Healy, was a popular Broadway performer. Healy's act leaned heavily toward slapstick, and he added, as supporting performers, Moe and Shemp Howard, then Larry Fine. A film career was soon in the offing for Healy and his band of funsters.
Take your time.
He's wrong. This is the way.
Do that again. Do that again.
It's hook.
He's wrong. Now, this is the way, isn't it?
Healy went on to flourish in a career as a single. He appeared in films with Clark Gable and Joan Crawford. His greatest work was his last. He co-starred in MGM's Hollywood Hotel, an ambitious, big-budget comedy. Concurrent with the release of the film came the birth of his first child, a son. The night of his son's birth, Healy painted the town, celebrating at a number of clubs. Given to outbreaks of temper when intoxicated, Healy, some stories go, began to argue with a group of college students who attacked him in the parking lot of the Trocadero nightclub. Healy died later that night of head injuries. A prevailing rumor, which has resurfaced some 50 years later, is the strange tale that while working at MGM Studios, Healy reportedly began a feud with a famous tough guy character actor. Apparently, the two had words several times the previous year while working together. The night of Healy's death, it has been alleged that the performer Healy feuded with was present at the Trocadero, and it was he and another man who attacked Healy. Upon returning to his apartment, Healy phoned both Shemp Howard and another former vaudeville co-star and told of his attack. Some 50 years later, while researching a book on the life of the Stooges, one writer interviewed two individuals connected with the trio. They had not spoken to one another in over 35 years. Both told the author a similar tale of being present when Healy phoned to accuse a major MGM star of beating him. Why didn't these parties come forward? It turns out that the star's companion that evening was a powerful underworld kingpin, and no witness emerged for fear of their lives. The shooting murder of William Desmond Taylor became one of the most celebrated mysteries of the 1920s. The death of the flamboyant $100,000 per year talent embroiled several of Hollywood's leading names of the era. Mabel Normand, Mary Miles Minter, Charlie Chaplin's leading lady of the time, and even America's sweetheart, Mary Pickford. Taylor's body was discovered in his living room by his butler on an early February morning in 1922. His corpse pierced by a .38 caliber bullet. As the Homicide Division's investigation developed, a scenario as complex as the most elaborately plotted murder mystery evolved. A 6-month investigation of the murder turned up nothing but false leads, dead ends, and scores of theories and news scandals. The most damaging scandal, at least in terms of careers, befell screen comedian Mabel Normand. She was exposed as a cocaine abuser. As a result, her screen career faltered, and she quietly withdrew from the Hollywood scene. The virginal image of actress Mary Miles Minter was shattered when her torrid love letters to Taylor were discovered on the murder scene. Also found on the scene were several pairs of panties with the initials MMM embroidered on them. For no apparent reason, Minter's mother, Charlotte Shelby, was known to have practiced target shooting with a .38 caliber pistol shortly before Taylor's murder. Taylor's personal secretary, it turned out, was an embezzler who allegedly blackmailed Taylor. He, too, became a suspect in the murder. One of the most astonishing revelations to emerge from the Taylor inquiry was the fact that Taylor's true identity was that of William Dean Tanner, who fled his wife and child in New York only to assume a new identity as a Hollywood director. To complicate matters even further, strong evidence emerged to prove Taylor was a homosexual. As to the question of who did kill William Desmond Taylor, 50 years worth of evidence uncovered by an author who had access to film director King Vidor's files, which revealed confidential police records, seems to point the finger of guilt at Minter's mother, Charlotte Shelby. However, with a cast as complex as the William Desmond Taylor murder, only the ghost of Taylor himself could settle the issue, which is highly unlikely, even in Hollywood. Thelma Todd was known both on and off camera as something of a madcap. The young comedian actress romped through Laurel and Hardy movies and Marx Brothers films by day, and by night frequented the more lively Hollywood clubs. Following a party held in her honor at the Café Trocadero on December 15, 1935, Todd died of carbon monoxide poisoning. She was at the proverbial height of her career, and currently starring with Zazu Pitts in a series of two-reeler comedies for the Hal Roach Studios.
What I mean is tight. You know, I got legs.
I assumed as much.
Assume nothing. Say, get an eyeful of this.
Sign her up, Professor. A like this, get away from you, Professor. She's great, I'm telling you. If you see this gal...
Well...
Thelma and Zazu were becoming regarded as a female Laurel and Hardy. Thelma's body was discovered behind the wheel of her car in a locked garage. Her corpse was bedecked in a mink coat and jewelry. As with the death of William Desmond Taylor, a mountain of contradictory evidence surfaced regarding her demise. Some historians point the finger of guilt at her current live-in boyfriend, film director Roland West. Thelma's close friend Ida Lupino claimed that Todd told her that she was growing tired of West and was having an affair with a younger suitor. Did West learn of Thelma's flings and do her in? Chauffeur Ernie Peters, who drove Thelma home the night of her death, testified before a grand jury that Thelma told him that she was afraid of racketeers who wanted to install gambling equipment in the roadside cafe that she owned. Other witnesses came forward who swore that they saw Todd drive by them in the company of a man several hours after the time the L.A. coroner estimated she had died. An autopsy revealed that within hours of her death, Thelma had ingested string beans and peas, items which were not served to guests at the Trocadero party. Today, more than 55 years after Todd's passing, the debate continues as to whether her death was accidental, murder, or suicide. Hollywood personalities who took their own lives represent a startling roster of celebrity names. One of the earliest, most intriguing and unusual Hollywood suicides was that of Peg Entwistle. As a young RKO contract player, Entwistle became disillusioned with her career and her lifestyle. In many ways, her death was a type of editorial, a statement of fact that the quest for elusive stardom can be deadly. Dressed in an elaborate leading lady costume, she drove to the top of Mount Lee and then scaled the 50-foot-high letter H of the Hollywood sign and leapt to her death. Her decomposing remains were discovered days later by a group of hikers who wanted a better view of glamorous Hollywood. Jean Harlow became the undisputed sex goddess of the 1930s. After appearing in a number of comedic roles, generally cast as a sexy ingenue, Harlow was spotted by Texas millionaire turned movie maker Howard Hughes. Hughes had nearly completed a World War I flying epic, Hell's Angels, when the advent of talking pictures forced Hughes to reshoot the picture. Hughes chose the seductive Jean Harlow as his star.
500,000 people are lining the streets. Jean Harlow.
Thank you. I would like to use this occasion to publicly thank Mr. Hughes for the opportunity he gave me.
Harlow's performance was a sensation, and she soon became known as the Platinum Blonde. Harlow did all within her power to convey the fact that she was Hollywood's hottest sex queen. Prior to filming, she would massage her nipples with ice to make them photograph more prominently. She also shunned wearing underwear of any kind when before the cameras. To add more grist to the gossip mill, she even dyed her pubic hair platinum to match the hair on her head. It was truly ironic that she ultimately married a diminutive, balding, effeminate man who was twice her age, Paul Byrne. Harlow and Byrne met at MGM Studios, where Byrne was the chief assistant to producer Irving Thalberg. The Byrne-Harlow marriage took place on July 2nd, 1932. That night, Jean Harlow discovered her husband suffered from chronic impotency. Byrne theorized that by marrying a sex goddess, his problem would be cured. A drunken Byrne, frustrated at his inability to achieve an erection, beat his 21-year-old bride with a cane. He also bit her stomach, back, and inner thighs so badly that he drew blood. Jean fled to her agent Arthur Landau, who surveyed the brutality and helped tend to Harlow's wounds. The powers that be at MGM Studios were terrified of scandal. Should their newest sex symbol seek a divorce so soon after her marriage, her popularity would suffer. So it was decided that the couple would live together for a respectable period of time. 2 months later, Byrne, who had been sleeping in separate quarters, entered Jean's bedroom wearing a huge rubber penis replete with over-exaggerated testicles. When an addendum rubber bulb was pressed, a built-in tube ejaculated a stream of water. This masquerade served as a tension breaker of sorts, and the pair became convulsed with laughter. The next day, Byrne stripped naked, and while standing before Jean's full-length mirror, pressed a .38 caliber gun to his temple and killed himself. A note left behind read, "Dearest dear, unfortunately this is the only way to make good the frightful wrong I have done you and to wipe out my abject humiliation. I love you, Paul. You understand that last night was only a comedy." 5 years later, Jean Harlow died of uremic poisoning. Harlow's mother, a Christian Scientist, refused to allow doctors to attend to her daughter until she was beyond help. At the time of her death, Jean was engaged to actor William Powell. Powell paid all of the funeral expenses and arranged for burial in a private $25,000 crypt at Forest Lawn Cemetery. The distraught Powell accompanied Jean's mother to the services, although for the rest of his life he hated the woman for killing his platinum blonde. Character actor Albert Decker's death was at first ruled a suicide. The official inquiry into his death later changed the cause of his demise to accidental suffocation. Decker, probably best remembered for his starring role in Dr. Cyclops, was a practitioner of a relatively unknown sexual curiosity known as autoerotic asphyxia, the act of achieving sexual orgasm by risking death, in Decker's case, by hanging himself. Arranging a pulley system, Decker apparently felt he was in control of the situation, but something went wrong. Not only did Decker merely hang himself, but he was also bedecked in a kinky bondage arrangement.
He was blindfolded. A rein had been placed into his mouth. Hypodermic syringes hung from his arms, and his wrists were handcuffed. Scrawled in lipstick on various portions of his body were the words slave and cocksucker. Make me suck was printed on his throat, and a rendering of a vagina was drawn on his stomach. As word spread throughout the Hollywood community of the bizarre circumstances of Decker's death, his close associates demanded a further investigation into the matter. Many claimed that a man of Decker's breeding would not subject himself to such a grotesque practice, and argued that he must have been the victim of foul play. The police remained satisfied that Decker succumbed as a direct result of his eccentricity.
In life, Decker's career was distinguished by his appearance in numerous film classics.
In death, Decker was distinguished by going down in history as Hollywood's most bizarre death. Albert Decker discovered the hard way that things go wrong. Years earlier, Hollywood's Mexican Spitfire, actress Lupe Velez, made the same discovery. Velez starred in several comedies as a quick-tempered Latino beauty, most notably in a series of films with Leon Earl, as well as a host of other comics.
Come on, baby. Knock him out in the first round. Don't forget we gotta go places.
Okay, honey.
All right, dear.
Forget that, baby. Sit down.
Velez had a string of affairs with a number of Hollywood's major talents. Velez's most notorious love affair was her tempestuous relationship with Gary Cooper, with whom she co-starred in the 1929 film Wolf Song. The Velez-Cooper affair was punctuated with much publicized fights, verbal as well as physical. Paramount Studios and Cooper's mother frowned upon their love interests and eventually broke up the couple. Johnny Tarzan Weissmuller was the next official man in her life for 6 years when Velez became Mrs. Weissmuller. The Velez-Weissmuller coupling was another relationship highlighted by rather colorful brawls. Very often, as with Gary Cooper, their dirty laundry was aired in public places. Following her divorce from Johnny Weissmuller, Velez lost little time cultivating another romance, this time with actor Harold Raymond. A careless Velez soon discovered she was pregnant by Raymond. An outraged Velez decided that rather than subject herself to a marriage of convenience or an abortion, she would take her own life. Velez created an elaborate tableau for her exit. She called a number of florists and filled her bedroom with fresh flowers. She lighted hundreds of candles, perfumed herself in her finest gown. Velez then downed a bottle of sleeping tablets and lay upon her bed with her hands folded across her breast to await the eternal slumber. As we have said, sometimes things go wrong. The effect of the sleeping pills made her nauseous. Velez left a trail of vomit from her bed to her bathroom. It was there the disoriented, dying starlet lost consciousness and plunged head-first into her toilet, where she drowned. Not exactly the end she had envisioned.
That's Maxwell.
My nemesis.
If he finds you here, he'll wipe off the floor with you. You better hide someplace.
Where?
There.
That's the final degradation.
Oh, go on.
The comedy team of Clark and McCullough is all but forgotten today. In their time, the vaudeville team of Bobby Clark and Paul McCullough was compared to the Marx Brothers. The team's potential was fantastic. Critics felt that the pair would rival many box office favorites.
Hey! Get that doghouse out of here. What? I said shut up and get out of here with that noise.
That's what they all say. Best music they ever heard. Thank you.
But this was not to be. Team member Paul McCullough could not cope with the rigors of participating in film work. He suffered a breakdown. After an appropriate rest in an East Coast sanatorium, his partner Bobby Clark came to collect his lifelong friend and co-star to drive him home. Along the way, McCullough asked Clark to pull off the road to a barber shop. Once seated in the barber's chair, McCullough grabbed a straight razor and for no apparent reason cut a deep slit into his throat. A flabbergasted Clark and the barber watched McCullough flop and thrash about, bleeding profusely, then expire. Had this tragic incident not occurred, the team probably would be ranked alongside of the Three Stooges and Laurel and Hardy in popularity. Instead, since their output of product was rather limited, they are sadly forgotten. July 4th, 1948. Carol Landis celebrated the holiday by leaving a suicide note and taking enough pills to kill 10 people. Landis rose to stardom via her portrayal of a cave woman in the science fiction film 1 Million BC, starring opposite Victor Mature. Other film credits included I Wake Up Screaming, Manila Calling, and Topper Returns.
Must have been his wife with him.
Landis had 5 husbands and was losing her 5th. Many theories came forward as to why she killed herself. One rumor was that Landis discovered she had cancer. Another is that she had fallen in love with a young GI. After sleeping with him, she found that the GI boyfriend had merely wanted to brag to his buddies that he had successfully bedded a famous movie star. This news threw Landis into a severe depression. Hollywood luminary Rex Harrison discovered Landis's body on the floor of her bathroom, her cheek resting on a jewelry box. Harrison was another object of Landis's affection. Perhaps the fact that Landis had 5 husbands and a number of documented affairs during her 8-year Hollywood career, she is best remembered for her stage appearance in A Lady Says Yes. Disillusionment may have been the cause of George Reeves' death, as in so many other celebrity deaths. However, many have come forward to dispute the official Reeves' death as being a suicide. Reeves had won national fame as star of the immensely popular TV program Superman. Prior to Superman, Reeves appeared in small roles in dozens of films. His first major role was as one of the Tarleton twins in Gone with the Wind. Close friends of Reeves contended that Reeves was in excellent spirits. He was about to be married to his longtime girlfriend, Lenore Lemon. Witnesses on the scene the night of June 16, 1959, contend that Reeves became irritated when 2 late-night visitors appeared at his door. A disgruntled Reeves left the room in a huff. As he made his exit, Lenore Lemon said, "Well, he'll probably shoot himself now." When the sound of a drawer opening above was heard, Lemon also joked, "See, now he's getting a gun."
It gives me an idea.
Seconds later, a shot rang out, and Reeves' body sprawled naked across his bed. One party who refused to accept the official account of Reeves' death was his mother, Helen Besselow. The grieving woman spent the last 5 years of her life in a fruitless attempt to prove her son was murdered. Mrs. Besselow hired a number of private detectives, as well as forensic pathologists who performed several private autopsies on the deceased. As Mrs. Besselow refused to rest in her quest to uncover a murder plot, it was necessary to keep Reeves' body accessible to physicians who from time to time were called upon to examine the remains. There was never a question concerning the death of Freddie Prinze. The young comic actor had been blessed with a meteoric rise to fame. At the time of his death, he was starring in a successful TV show, Chico and the Man, and was a popular fixture on late-night talk shows and Las Vegas casinos. Unfortunately, Prinze was a pill and cocaine abuser who had serious bouts of depression. His close associates were often awakened with late-night phone calls whenever the actor was feeling his suicidal urges. On these occasions, he would toy with a gun playing Russian roulette or entertaining similar flirtations with death. On January 28, 1977, the flirtation ended. Prinz placed a gun to his head and pulled the trigger. He died the next day at UCLA Medical Center, sadly snuffing out the great potential which was available to him. Many felt that Prinz's abuse of cocaine and the depressant Quaaludes were as responsible for his death as the bullet which tore through his brain. In the months before his final desperate act, he was rendered impotent as a result of his startling drug consumption. Cocaine had damaged his nasal passages to the extent that Prinz resorted to taking the cocaine by forcing it into his rectum. His marriage had ended due to his bizarre drug-induced antics, and Prinz's depression worsened. Finally, his obsession with death became a self-fulfilling prophecy, and he joined his hero, Lenny Bruce, on the long list of celebrities who died too young. Lenny Bruce was in many ways a role model for Freddie Prinz. In a sense, they lived in parallel universes, and both met similar ends. Lenny's mother pursued a show business career, and Lenny soon followed, doing stand-up comedy in small bars and strip clubs. As he became a more polished entertainer, he began writing and performing his own material. In the early 1950s, he wrote a low-budget screenplay, Dance Hall Racket. Bruce starred in the film along with his wife, Honey Bruce. Eventually, Bruce became labeled as an angry comic, since much of his performance was directed towards social or political abuses. Bruce gained the most notoriety when he began to inject so-called obscene materials into his act. The authorities and Bruce were at cross purposes as to the definition of just what was obscene. His first obscenity arrest occurred in San Francisco when he used the word cocksucker in his act. From then on, the police became permanent fixtures at Lenny Bruce's performances. More often than not, attention was drawn to Bruce due to publicity surrounding previous engagements and arrests. Police surveillance quickly turned into police persecution as authorities leapt at every opportunity to add to Bruce's legal woes while gaining publicity for themselves as protectors of morality. In several instances, nightclub owners found themselves suddenly facing fire and health inspectors, and as their business licenses hung in jeopardy, Bruce's bookings diminished. The crusading comic became obsessed with constitutional law, the First Amendment, and rights of free speech. His health deteriorated, and savings dwindled as his court fees rose. On August 2nd, 1966, Lenny succumbed to a demon which had plagued him throughout his career, morphine. The sick comic's body was discovered on his bathroom floor by a house guest, a hypodermic syringe still embedded in his arm. The pose Lenny affected in death was ironically similar to the one he chose for his death scene in Dance Hall Racket. In a final sick gesture of their own, the LA police permitted reporters to enter Bruce's bathroom in pairs to photograph the comic's naked corpse. The authorities obviously still maintaining their own particular definition of obscenity. Errol Flynn represented the ultimate in masculine virility to millions of moviegoers throughout the world. Flynn romped through cinematic adventure after adventure. During his lifetime, he portrayed dashing heroes in Robin Hood, Charge of the Light Brigade, and They Died with Their Boots On. His real-life story surpassed most of his screen stories. By the 1940s, Flynn's name had become acquainted with sex. Most fans believed that his waking moments were devoted to debauchery and drink. He married 3 times, kept a number of mistresses, and engaged in both discreet and public affairs. His affairs became public when scorned lovers took exception to Errol turning his affections elsewhere, or when irate husbands became involved.
Oh, hold it, fellas. Hold it. Oh.
In 1942, two scorned young women, Betty Hansen and Peggy Satterley, became linked with Flynn. Hansen, via the new regime in the L.A. District Attorney's Office, charged that Flynn had raped her following a card and tennis party. Then there was Satterley, a busty dancer from Hollywood's Florentine Gardens, who also charged that Flynn had raped her while on board his yacht, the Scirocco.
It seems both women were minors at the time Flynn allegedly slept with them.
In typical Flynn fashion, Errol noted that a man seldom asked a potential mate to show a birth certificate or driver's license before jumping into bed, particularly when a girl had the body of a Greek goddess. Flynn faced up to 5 years in jail whether his underage partners consented to the coupling or not. No sooner was Flynn accused when newspaper headlines worldwide proclaimed, "Errol Flynn charged with rape." The head of Warner Brothers Studios, Jack L. Warner, was horrified. 2 Flynn films were awaiting release, and if Flynn was found guilty, the studio's fortunes would suffer. Attorney Jerry Giesler, who was to defend several celebrities in his lifetime, was retained to defend Warner's fallen star. For the next 5 months of his life, Flynn was subjected to the rigors of trial preparation. Now all the salacious stories, the jokes about Flynn's love life, and tales of his wild lifestyle served to place Flynn on shaky legal ground.
I've got something for you, too. And it's my heart, black as it is.
While the starting date of Flynn's trial was postponed a number of times, an investigation was conducted into the backgrounds of Betty Hansen and Peggy Satterley. Hansen, it was discovered, had once been arrested for vagrancy. Satterley had garnered a reputation about Hollywood as a hot number, as a chorus dancer attired in a skimpy costume. Peggy had ample opportunities to meet many of the town's prominent males, and she apparently did. The first of the 2 young women to testify was Peggy Satterley. Flynn was shocked to see, for the obvious benefit of the jury and the world press, that Satterley was outfitted in bobby socks and pigtails, quite a different image than the one she conveyed weeks earlier while working as a scantily clad, bare-breasted chorus girl. Satterley testified that she was on board the yacht Scirocco en route to a party on Catalina Island when in a conversation with Flynn she mentioned how beautiful the moon looked, and Flynn countered with, "It would look much more beautiful through a porthole." Later that evening, Satterley claimed that Flynn entered her stateroom and raped her.
This is the place where gold pours into the hand of you and honey in your mouth, and women that go to the men with the blood and fire to take them. This is for us, that is.
She recalled that while engaged in intercourse, Flynn whispered, "Darling, look out the porthole. You see that glorious moon?" This remark provoked gales of laughter in the courtroom and was quoted to Flynn, much to his chagrin, for the rest of his life. During the weeks of the trial, Attorney Giesler eventually was able to catch the young lady in a number of conflicting points of testimony, which served to discredit her with the jury. In final arguments before the court, Giesler climbed into the witness stand and pondered aloud what was in this girl's mind as she sat here. In describing her ordeal, Hansen said that after meeting at a party, Flynn led her to a bedroom while the party continued, and Hansen claimed Flynn removed her slacks, a blouse, brassiere, and teddies. "He took off everything but my shoes and stockings. Then he took off his clothes, all but his shoes." To suggest Hansen implied consent, Attorney Giesler asked her if she resisted Flynn removing her clothing. She responded, "I didn't have no objections." Again, an outburst of laughter filled the courtroom. At a critical point of the trial, Giesler learned that in an apparent attempt to extort money from major studios, certain corrupt officials had orchestrated the entire Flynn case as a warning to other celebrities who were targeted for blackmail. Giesler's ongoing interrogation and private investigation disclosed that both women had testified against Flynn in order to dismiss pending criminal charges against themselves. Hansen faced a 4-year jail term in juvenile hall for engaging in oral intercourse, and Satterley had undergone an illegal abortion. Both charges were felonies in California. Finally, the jury convened to consider the evidence and arrive at a decision. After 4 hours, Flynn was vindicated on all counts. Perhaps it was fortunate for Flynn that 9 of the 12 jury members were women. The trial had finally ended, but its memory was kept alive for years when a new phrase denoting sexual triumph with women came into the national idiom: "I'm in like Flynn." Whether or not Flynn was totally innocent will be debated in Hollywood for years. If there was a sexual liaison between Flynn and his accusers, it was a secret he would take with him to his grave. Today, Flynn's body rests beneath a bronze statue of a naked woman, who, unlike so many women Flynn met in life, keeps her legs crossed. In the late 1930s, Frances Farmer was one of Hollywood's more promising new starlets. The movie-going public became enchanted with her. She was on her way to becoming one of the most popular female stars in America. Then her fortunes drastically changed. World War II had broken out. While driving to a party in Santa Monica, a policeman stopped her for driving in a dim-out zone with her headlights on. Farmer harbored a dislike for police, and she became abusive. She was arrested for drunk driving and given a suspended jail sentence of 180 days. The arrest for drunkenness created a serious scandal, and co-stars, agents, and studios began to avoid Farmer and the bad publicity which accompanied her. She began work on a new film, but early into the production she became embroiled in an argument with a studio hairdresser. Farmer struck the woman, dislocating her jaw. A few hours later, police, acting on an assault complaint, arrived to arrest her. Again, she resisted arrest and had to be forcefully removed. At police headquarters, she listed her occupation as cocksucker. Now the tabloids accelerated the war against her, describing Farmer as a foul-mouthed troublemaker. In the court appearance following the arrest, she was sarcastic and arrogant. An irritated judge sentenced her to 180 days in jail. A struggling, kicking Farmer was dragged out of the court as she shouted obscenities at the judge. Her behavior in jail led to a court-ordered transfer to the psychiatric ward of Los Angeles General Hospital. Her next years saw her transferred from one mental institution to another. She was subjected to weekly electroshock treatments, kept in straitjackets and padded cells, and even tied naked to a toilet for long periods of time. She was raped dozens of times by inmates as well as male nurses. Farmer lived under these severe conditions for 5 years before her release from the sanitarium. There was a half-hearted comeback attempt made by her in 1957. She made one film appearance with Bobby Driscoll in a B-exploitation film, The Party Crashers. In April of 1970, she died a slow and painful death in the charity ward of an Indianapolis hospital. The final years in the life of Vivien Leigh were also quite tragic. Moviegoers knew Vivien Leigh as Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind.
If I were to mention all those who've shown me such wonderful generosity through Gone with the Wind, I should have to entertain you with an oration as long as Gone with the Wind itself.
And as Blanche Dubois in A Streetcar Named Desire. To British and Hollywood society, she was Mrs. Laurence Olivier. She harbored a feverish dedication to acting and appeared in scores of Shakespearean productions and avant-garde plays. Privately, Leigh was possessed by many demons. Tuberculosis had plagued her since 1945. She also had severe emotional problems and often succumbed to nymphomania and schizophrenia. During such episodes, Leigh would roam the streets of shady areas of London seeking bed partners. During these periods, Leigh did not discriminate. She slept with barmen, waiters, and even the cab drivers who took her home were sometimes invited to spend the night.
Yeah. Take it and beer.
Everybody should always come to you first.
Leigh chose not to worry about these indiscretions, but like Scarlett O'Hara, preferred to think about it tomorrow. Sex queen Clara Bow also had a live-for-today attitude. Bow perhaps best personified the wild flapper girl of the 1920s. Her early films embodied all the wildness of the Roaring Twenties, an era of bathtub gin, sex, and sin. Bow's romances included many prominent film industry figures, as well as blue-collar factory workers and unemployed stagehands. In 1930, Beau's career suffered a severe setback when her former private secretary, Daisy DeVoe, sold a tell-all tale of Beau's sexual indiscretions to an early scandal sheet, New York's Graphics. A lengthy court battle ensued, with many of Beau's most intimate secrets becoming public. Beau's most talked-about sexual encounter, however, was with the entire 1927 USC football team. Beau invited team members to her home frequently and filled the boys with bootlegged booze. Eventually, the USC coach ordered signs posted about the locker rooms. Clara Beau is off limits.
Well, that was an interesting show and everything. So tell me what you thought of it. Yeah, very interesting episode of Betrayal. Well, that is our show for today, and we will be back next week, same time, same channel, for another episode of Betrayal on Armed Radio. So in the meantime, you guys, be safe out there. And thank you so much to all of our first responders, doctors, nurses, warehouse workers, grocery workers, delivery service people, armed forces. You guys are rock stars. You know, try and keep your, thoughts positive during this trying time, and things will get better, you guys. It will get better. We have to believe that. And we have to just continue just to be safe, and it will get better. I'm sure that when the plague was around and cholera and the Spanish flu and, all those things, I'm sure that people thought it was the end of the world. Heck, when 9/11 happened, we thought it was the end of the world. But, it took us a long time, but we got through it. We passed the plague. We passed the cholera. We have passed the Spanish flu. We will get through this. We just have to keep our heads on straight and thinking positive thoughts and being helpful and staying at home and just, sucking it up. I mean, people in World War I and World War II had it so much more difficult than what we have. We've at least got the internet. We've got television. They did not. And, they sometimes didn't have power. We've got power, you guys. We've got grocery stores where they sometimes had to go hunting for their food. But we've got a lot of things to be very grateful for. So don't stress out. If you feel like, you need to talk to a counseling service, there are online counseling services available. Also, there are hotlines available. Please use those and, talk to somebody. So, and always, there's always 911 if you have to. But we're going to get through this. We just got to keep a positive outlook and just, wash our hands, stay away from people, and keep positive. And that is it. So until next time, be safe out there. Bye-bye now.